lovers, and welcome to the Liberty Mike podcast, broadcasting from an undisclosed location in the heart of Dixie. I am Michael, and I'm here with Liberty Larry.
How's it going?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
I was sure you were going to complain about the weather again.
Well, I wasn't going to, but now that you mention it,
Yeah.
it's cold again.
Man, I had to work really hard not to turn on the air conditioner 2 days ago.
Oh, so we did at my house. Like I say, once it warmed up, that bad boy was turned on. We may be slow to turn on the heater, but we're quick to turn on that air conditioner.
Yeah, well, now it's 40 degrees again, so.
Yeah. Dude, and everybody in my house is sick. I'm fine, but it's the weather changing. Like when it goes from hot to cold so quick, like it's done.
Yeah.
And normally it messes me up too, and I'm good so far. So here's hoping.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely making the rounds.
I always assumed in my house it was because like this time of year when it's like really swinging back and forth, it's so extreme that you go back and forth, or I do. I have like a fairly narrow temperature range where I'm really comfortable anyway. It's like 64 to 70 degrees.
Oh yeah, that's your zone.
Yeah, that's
a small zone there, buddy.
Yeah, that's where I want the house.
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So when it's swinging wildly like it's swinging right now, I always assumed that I got sick in the past because I was literally switching back and forth between air conditioner and heat.
Yeah.
Like I have the air conditioner on for a couple of days, then I'm turning the heat on for a couple of days. I'm like, man.
Yeah. We really try to, at least with the cold temperatures, we pretty well mirror what's outside in the house.
Well, at least you don't have the wind.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's always warmer in the house because at least unless the fan's on.
Yeah, it's probably a little drier inside. You don't have the humidity inside that you do outside.
Yeah. So.
There, that's all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
Well, you guys missed the pre-show.
Yeah, the rant.
Yeah, it never works when I get behind the microphone, but
yeah, I feel like once we get into things, you're probably getting in full rant mode.
Get loud again. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
See if the magic's still there, the fire's still there.
All right, so a couple of little things to start, and then we'll probably spend the balance on the episode on the other topic.
Yeah, I was gonna say we'll save that for the end.
So there's reports that Biden is going to preemptively pardon some government officials since, Trump is going to, for the first time in history, use the Justice Department to attack his political enemies, because that's never been done before, and certainly not by the current administration.
All right.
And like some of the people, it's like Chuck Schumer and I don't know, Mark Milley and people like this that he's going to go ahead and pardon. And I was thinking about it, like actually Trump's, despite what the news says, that Trump has made it clear that he's going to use the Justice Department to go after his political enemies, he's actually made it really clear that he wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've heard has said that. I mean, I've heard everything that's came out of his mouth,
right?
At least post-election has been, he's not doing any of that.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the past yet.
We're not going backwards. I want to move forward.
Yeah.
And actually, he had some line. I don't remember exactly, but I did like it that he was I forget exactly how he put it, but he was like, once everybody's doing well again, like he wants like that to be his legacy or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget how he phrased it, but in reference to he said it in reference to the using the Justice Department against his enemies, and I actually thought it was a really good line. Like that's I mean, that's what he at least proclaims that he wants to do. And I actually believe him as far as that. I mean, at this point, like this presidency is going to be his legacy.
Yeah.
And he wants it to be, he wants to leave the country better than he found it.
Well, and before his first term, and even once he took office, his entire base was chanting "lock her up" about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And he never went after her at all.
And then just dropped. I mean, the day after the election, he was like, oh, well, that was a bunch of campaign talk, I mean, we're not.
Well, he'd never said it anyway. It was his crowds.
But he was like in it though.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he was telling them, no, guys, we're not doing that. Like, But
true.
you are right. It is true. Well, no, he did, but he did say she'd be in jail during that debate.
Did he?
Yeah, because there was
I don't
that
remember
big
that.
moment where she said something, and he's like, "Yeah, because you'd be in jail."
Oh.
So I can't remember the quote now, but
Yeah, I don't remember.
but that was coming more from his supporters than him.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, I really think what it's about is, so if Biden goes ahead and preemptively pardons all these people, then they have the talking point for the rest of history, I guess. They can say, well, if Biden hadn't done that, then Trump would have been jailing all his political enemies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that way you can say it in 2 years and so forth. Like, well, it's a good thing that Biden went ahead and pardoned all those people, or Trump would have thrown them in jail.
It really is a battle of the talking points too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that really kind of brings it out right there. The fact that, I mean, you're right. That is exactly what they're doing. I don't think that they really believe that Trump's going to go after them, but it gives them something to talk about from here on.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. If they left it alone and he doesn't do anything, then they can never mention it again.
Exactly.
But if they go ahead and pardon everybody, even if he never had any intention, which I don't think he does, of jailing all those people, they can continue to talk about it as if he was going to.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing we prevented that.
Yeah.
I mean, we wouldn't want some administration to use the justice system to attack their political enemies.
Yeah, we can't have that. Right?
It's incredible to me that they can stand up in front of people, like the media too, and talk about this in this way and not even consider for a moment all these charges that were brought against Trump before the election.
Yeah. Which, by the way,
I haven't heard anything about since the election.
Well, are the reason he's here right now, because it's easy to forget Trump wasn't super popular after he lost that last election.
Yeah.
And the truth is like, he was pretty well done until they started going after him with the documents cases, and that's where it started. And every charge they brought, he got more and more popular. People rallied to him.
Yeah.
Because that was the big talking point, even from the Republicans after 2020, was, all right, what's like after Trump?
Because it's not that Trump, I mean, Trump has a certain charisma that I don't entirely understand, but I see, I feel it.
Yeah.
But it's not that, he isn't politically popular because people like him so much. He's politically popular because people see him as outside of the system and in opposition to it. And people are far more upset with the political elites than they are with anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And so since he's seen as an enemy to the political elites, that's where his political popularity comes from.
Yeah. Which is the reason every time they dropped the charge against him, his poll numbers went up. Mm-hmm. I do believe that if they had not went after him in that way, I don't know that he would have got through the primary.
Yeah, we would be looking at President Biden again, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Oh,
or what, Nikki Haley?
I
don't think that she would have gotten through, but somebody, like I said,
I think DeSantis would have been the guy probably then.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely possible.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
But DeSantis was just so bad at it.
Yeah, that's true. But Nikki Haley wasn't really good at it either.
Yeah.
And she's, I don't know, she's kind of DeSantis gained so much popularity because of the COVID stuff.
Yeah.
And Nikki Haley didn't have anything to hang on to. There was nothing that gave her a popular boost.
No, but she was the establishment's pick.
Yeah, but once again...
Yeah, that's not exactly where you want to be.
Right. I mean, at least DeSantis is still has the image, at least in part, of being a guy who's opposed to the establishment.
Yeah.
And Nikki Haley doesn't have that at all.
Got that,
she has the reputation of being of the establishment.
Exactly.
And at least where the Republican Party is now, I don't think that puts her in contention.
Oh, no. I 100% agree.
No matter how much the news supports her. Because that doesn't really help her either.
No, not anymore.
Yeah. I don't know, though. But, yeah, going after Trump is the reason that he's he's in
Sitting
office
where he's
again.
at. Yeah, exactly.
Or about to be, as the
Yeah.
president-elect. So interesting.
Yeah.
You were asking me if you can pardon somebody before a crime has been committed before we got started. I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Yeah. I am going to go ahead and pardon Hunter Biden for going out there and killing my political opposition after I leave office.
Yeah, right.
He and his crackhead buddies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's like I say. I mean, it's weird to me. It's weird to me that you can be pardoned for crimes that haven't went to trial yet.
Yeah. I don't think that you can pardon for a crime that hasn't been committed yet.
Yeah.
But you can. It has to have been a crime that occurred but hasn't been prosecuted.
Yeah.
Or it doesn't have to be, but I mean,
but
it can be for a crime that has occurred. But
it has to be going backwards, though.
Yeah, I think so.
I think. I mean, yeah.
It would be really ridiculous if you could do it the other way. I don't.
Yeah.
That's. I don't want to think about that kind of power being invested in the president.
Right.
So an update on another story. We talked about it a lot when it first came up, and well, maybe not a lot, but we talked about it a fair bit when it first came up, and then we talked about it again last week or the week before, which is the Daniel Penny case for manslaughter. In the end, they dropped the manslaughter charge, actually, so that they could move on because they couldn't get past a hung jury.
Yeah.
This is just a recap from last week or the week before. So what remained was a negligent homicide charge. And now, or as of this week, I guess, it was early this week, Daniel Penny has been acquitted of all charges. And so he will go free for defending, killing a man in the process of defending the other passengers on the subway in New York.
Yeah. Count one for the good guys.
Yeah, I'm like, way to go, New York jury.
Right.
And the more I thought about it, like, we didn't have as much trouble. When I lived in Atlanta, you saw some of this.
Yeah.
I don't think that we had as much trouble with the crazy people on MARTA as they have on the subway in New York, because the mass transit system in Atlanta is terrible. Like it only covered like this little hourglass through the city, and Atlanta is very spread out.
Yeah.
And so like the actual, in terms of the size of Atlanta, it covered very little of it.
Yeah.
So, which is why traffic's so terrible in that city, because most places you actually do have to drive.
Yeah.
But I spent plenty of time on MARTA. Like I went there to go to school. I went there to do some work stuff. Concerts and all kinds of things, museums, what have you.
Yeah.
Things that were downtown or midtown, which there's a fair bit. Like a lot of stuff that I did was downtown or midtown. Take MARTA to.
Yeah.
So I encountered some people that weren't quite right on MARTA from time to time, but it wasn't real common, and nothing ever got out of control.
Never felt threatened.
Yeah, I mean, I did have like a couple of moments. Well, I wouldn't say I never felt threatened, because at least once, when we came to a stop, I got off the train and moved to the next car.
Just to go away from someone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who
was just like babbling incoherently, and and I thought, I don't think I want to be near this. This doesn't feel. I don't trust this guy.
Yeah.
But I suspect that a lot of this is that New Yorkers are accustomed to this, and so there was a sympathy.
Yeah.
About what happened, and an understanding that you can't depend on the police force to protect you. Yeah. And so when somebody was making threats to women and children and so forth on a MARTA, and this guy, and seemed like he was actually violent, and this guy stepped in and did something that they felt like, hey, that's reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody needed to do something.
Yeah. And certainly don't want to set a precedent that you can't depend on the cops, and you can't, and any regular citizen who steps up to defend you will go to jail.
Yeah. That's a very dangerous society you're putting together there.
Yeah.
You know.
And something that I do find really interesting is that there's a lot of places where that kind of behavior absolutely would not be tolerated.
Yeah.
Like in a gated community, that behavior would not be tolerated. On the Capitol steps, that behavior would not be tolerated.
On an airplane.
On an airplane, that behavior would not be tolerated.
Yeah.
And so it seems really weird that this guy was picked out to prosecute for such a thing.
Yeah.
And it's just because, well, you know, and in New York, it's not even true that it's just like the everyday people that ride the subway.
Yeah.
Everybody rides. Elites ride the subway in New York.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's how you get around. Like that's how it's done. Yeah.
Boston had a better mass transit system when I was in New England. I liked Boston's better, but it was that's beside the point. That's not it's totally irrelevant. I was just thinking. But so I think that, you know, like if this had been going on in the prosecutor's favorite restaurant where they took their family, like it would not have been tolerated. And yet for some reason they're defending this guy or attacking the man who, you know, defended people from a nut on a train that seemed violent.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, it's weird to me that it even came to trial. I'm glad that it did. I actually think that it's kind of important that these things do go to trial.
Yeah.
You and I were talking about this before.
Yeah.
And you disagreed with me on this, that it should, you said it should not have gone to trial.
I think it should have, anytime somebody dies, it needs to be looked into.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that every case needs to go to trial though. Mm-hmm. Like in something like this where it was like, it's pretty clear what happened here.
Yeah.
I don't see the point, but I am glad that since it did go to trial, it went the way it did.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm particularly happy in this case that now you have a precedent.
Yeah.
That protects somebody for defending the people around them.
Yeah.
But I guess.
I mean,
does it have to go to trial? That's actually a good question. I think that there should be a case anytime that somebody dies.
You think there needs to be a case, or think there needs to be an investigation?
And well, one and the same, really.
I mean, I think that, like in this situation, once they investigated and figured out what happened, I mean, I do think that the prosecutors should be able to use some judgment in whether they think that this warrants going to trial or not.
Well, but the prosecutors did decide that it.
And in this case, the prosecutors decided, and that's fine. But I disagree with that decision.
Yeah.
To take it for the prosecutor I think the prosecutor should have looked at this and been like, yeah, this isn't worth taking the trial. I'm not going to waste the resources on it. But I do think that the prosecutors should have that type of leeway. Yeah. You know, and I feel like they do. I mean, he didn't have to take this to trial. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I guess I don't feel that everything needs to go in front of a jury necessarily where somebody dies, but I prefer, like, if you're going to err one way or the other, I'd prefer that it err that way. I don't like the idea of government officials deciding what's justifiable murder and what's not.
Well, yeah. I mean, but that's the reason.
And leaving it at that, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, because I don't trust them.
Well, no, I'm with you on that one.
I'd rather regular people make that decision. And even hearing myself say that sounds terrifying, but at the same time...
Right. Have you met regular people?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, do I trust a mix of blue and white collar Americans that live in the area over attorneys? Generally, yes.
For the most part, yeah.
Especially when you're telling them they have to come to a consensus.
Yeah.
So, okay. I guess we're really down to two topics here, and one of them leads to the other.
All right.
I meant to talk about this last week, but we talked too long as it was. We ended up running over an hour, I think, anyway, and so it seemed silly to try and bring up this topic like right at the end and give it justice. Huh. That's going to be funnier as we get into it. So the International Criminal Court did issue arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes in Palestine.
Yeah.
In Gaza. Specifically, intentionally causing famine.
Yeah.
And so there have been, like, of course, the U.S. denounced the ICC and said that they're useless and nobody should listen to them. Now, a couple of years ago, the U.S. government was praising the ICC for saying that Putin was involved in war crimes in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, all right. So we're on the other side of this one.
Yeah. So now they're terrible, and
all I'm hearing is this sounds like this body is pretty straight shooter,
consistent. Yeah, you might say.
Yeah.
Now, I should have pulled this clip. I did pull some clips for tonight. I didn't pull this one. But my quote here, I edited a bit in terms of, like, I kept cutting phrases out.
Yeah.
To squeeze it down. So this is not an exact quote, but all these words were said in this order.
All right.
Which I guess makes it an exact quote, but there's ellipses.
Okay.
But Lindsey Graham was on Fox.
Oh, this will be rich.
Yeah, it is. And this is what he said, roughly.
Yeah.
He said a lot more words than this, but
okay.
All these words he said too.
Yeah.
To any ally, meaning ally of the United States.
Yeah.
Any of our allies, he's saying. If you're going to help the ICC as a nation enforce the arrest warrant against Bibi and Gallant, I will put sanctions on you. Now, first off, like, Lindsey Graham has the power to put sanctions on anybody, but
I'm going to go put sanctions on Walmart.
Yeah, he's actually threatening U.S. allies.
Yeah,
that if they enforce an ICC arrest warrant against another of our allies,
yeah,
that we will sanction them for agreeing with the international body that decided that this guy's responsible for war crimes.
That's just outrageous. I mean, he doesn't have any of this power.
No, I know. He's a blowhard, but
yeah, but it irritates me that he would throw a threat like that out there and not have, like, I mean, he's a congressman, right? Like, is he in the House or the Senate? Like,
House.
Is he House? Okay.
Yeah.
Like, he has one vote.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, I mean, you throw your weight around, okay, but, like, you're not Trump. Like, you're not making these decisions. Like,
yeah, I mean, he's on probably on some committees that could have some real influence on that kind of thing, but
maybe. Okay. I'll give you that.
But still, like, no, it's a ridiculous threat.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous threat. And Canada, by the way, is one of the countries that said that they would enforce the warrant.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. We're gonna sanction Canada,
right?
I guess. Which I'm not necessarily opposed to. No, I'm kidding. I'm opposed to sanctions all the way around.
Even if it is on our enemies.
Yeah.
The enemy of the north.
The enemy in the north, sending those commies down into our country to infiltrate. Yeah. With Trudeau.
Trudeau.
Oh no, it's not relevant. He came up when I was talking to my mom the other day, and I was trying to think if it was something that mattered here, what we were talking about, but it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
No, it probably shouldn't have come. It was kind of funny, but not worthwhile. So we have more developments.
Yeah.
Don't worry, people. We're getting to Syria. That's the big one here, right?
Yeah. Building up.
So there was a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Both sides needed it.
Yeah.
This war in Lebanon, or military action in Lebanon by the IDF, has been costly.
Yeah.
It's not easy going.
Yeah.
They've had some losses, men and equipment, that were somewhat significant for the size of especially considering their ongoing war in Gaza.
I was going to say, I mean, they're kind of stretched pretty thin, I would imagine.
Yeah. So it has been costly for the IDF, but it's also been costly for Hezbollah and Lebanon itself. The Israeli Defense Forces have caused a lot of destruction in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Because of that destruction, it has limited the popular support that Hezbollah has generally enjoyed in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So I think everybody was ready
To take
for
a break.
Yeah. Then, same day, the war started up in Syria again. The civil war started up in Syria again.
So it started back up. I had been under the assumption that this was like just persisting. That
it wasn't very active, though. I mean, like, so you had these, you had Hayat Tahrir al-Sham still controlling the area around Idlib.
Okay.
But like there weren't. I mean,
things
forces weren't
were pretty
moving.
settled.
Yeah, they were stable.
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah.
Would be the way. So it's not like there was an official ceasefire there.
Yeah. It's not like they were at peace before this.
Yeah, but there wasn't any kind of high level of active engagement.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, of course, it does call into question the purpose of the ceasefire.
Yeah.
In Lebanon.
Yeah.
That the same day the fighting starts up very active again in Syria.
Yeah.
And so the same day, the Sunni jihadists, and I'm going to clarify that in a moment.
All right.
The Sunni jihadists attacked the Syrian government forces in Aleppo and elsewhere. In just over a week, they have caused the collapse of the Assad government. Assad has fled to Russia, presumably.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's been verified at this point, but
I heard that, but I'm with you. I don't think that it was actually. I think it was like supposedly. Yeah.
Yeah. So just like let's start with this group. Now it has been. I will say. A lot of questions about how this happened so fast.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of reasons for it. One is that these forces probably all along have been given additional training and resources by the CIA. The CIA supported these forces in the past, and there's no reason to assume that they stopped anywhere along the way. Also, the Turkish government and Turkish military forces also got involved in this. And the Israeli Defense Forces were bombing military positions in Syria leading up to this as well. Even though Syria wasn't involved in the war that was going on in Israel. But actually, Israel has never stopped bombing Syria.
Yeah.
They've been bombing Syria for years and years. Like, this is not anything new.
Yeah.
So, and then also U.S. sanctions have ravaged the Syrian economy, including their ability to pay their soldiers. Oh. So there's good reason to think that a lot of bribes were given since a lot of Syrian forces just kind of abandoned their posts.
Yeah.
Left their guns and moved on. So probably
Checks
probably a lot of bribes were paid. And since the Syrian forces weren't as well paid as they had been in the past, it was easier to make that work.
Yeah.
Turkish support, CIA support, MI6 support, almost certainly, Mossad as well.
Yeah.
I mean, but we know probably the biggest players in this were the U.S., the U.K., and Israel. Yeah. And with Turkish on the ground support.
And traditionally, wouldn't have Russia kind of stepped in to try to support Assad?
And they did to some degree, but a lot of their forces have been refocused to the Ukrainian front. So a lot of Russian military forces that would have been
normally
in a position to react quickly aren't there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, at some point you got to call it a lost cause. Now, I also heard reporting that both Iran and Russia had been telling Assad, like instructing him on changes he needed to make to shore up his military.
Oh, yeah.
And he didn't.
Yeah.
And so there might have been like well, we told you so, and we're not risking a whole bunch of our stuff to protect you at this point.
We're kind of done propping you up. Yeah.
I mean, but it's bad for the region. And so...
I've heard reports that this could go worse than Libya.
Yeah. There's a good chance of it. I mean... All right, let's start with this primary group, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Right.
Now, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is the descendant of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Al-Qaeda in Syria that split off into ISIS and then renamed themselves Jabhat al-Nusra. Now, you may remember that in the Syrian war that was going on years ago, while we were doing this podcast, that at the al-Nusra front were the moderate rebels that the Americans were supporting in Syria. And of course, we were talking about this at the time of how ridiculous it was, because we were supporting the Shia militants in Iraq to overthrow the Sunni government.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the line after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, the U.S. realized, and oh gosh, what's his name? We talk about him all the time, the Pulitzer Prize winning reporter that reported on the My Lai massacre, and was the guy who broke the story about the U.S. involvement in the pipeline bombing.
Yes. What is his name? I know who you're talking about now.
I can't believe I can't think of his name. Like, I refer to this guy all the time. Oh, well. Anyway, I'm bad with names. We all know that at this point. But he wrote an article called The Redirection that was talking about how the U.S. government realized that they had just fought a war for Iran in Iraq, and that they needed to figure out how to weaken Iran since they'd just given them a big win in Baghdad.
Yeah.
And since they couldn't, it would be too obvious that we didn't know what we were doing if we went back into Iraq and fought the same war, but on the other side.
Right.
That they decided instead that they would topple Assad.
Yeah.
And use that to weaken Syria. And we almost made fun of it in like a darkly comedic way about how we were supporting the Shia militants in Iraq, and just across the border in Syria, we were supporting the Sunni militias against the Shia.
Yeah.
And so that there were stories literally of jihadists walking across the border, getting money and weapons from the U.S., walking it back across the border to fight against the U.S.
Right? Yeah. It's wild. Only government could screw something up that much.
Yeah. So this is the descendant of that group. So al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, rebranded itself somewhere along the way, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. That's the militant organization in Syria that we have now supported in their overthrow of the Syrian government.
Yeah.
And the guy who leads it is Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. And I don't know if we ever talked about him specifically before. I feel like he has to have come up because he's been a player for a long time in Al-Qaeda and then in ISIS.
Yeah.
And now he was a... in fact, my understanding is that he was one of the people that was sent by Al-Qaeda into Syria to set up Al-Qaeda in Syria.
Yeah.
And then he was a deputy leader of ISIS in Syria.
Yeah.
And now he's the leader of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham.
Yeah.
And like, this is so ridiculous in such a way. So the State Department still has Hayat Tahrir al-Sham listed as a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
But that's who we're supporting in Syria right now. And more than that, if you go to the State Department's website, at least as of earlier today, you will still find that the State Department is offering a $10 million reward for information leading to the capture of Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, I should send the State Department a message and say, I know where you can find this guy. You can find him in Damascus, and I'm pretty sure you can contact him through CIA front groups.
Right.
And see if I can get my $10 million.
Yeah, good luck with that. You can't make it up though.
It's ridiculous. And so what we've done here, though, in helping Israel overthrow their enemy Assad in Syria, who used to be a buddy of ours, although never really. I mean, after the Al-Qaeda attacked the U.S. and took down the towers and hit the Pentagon, there were a lot of, across the Middle East, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Yemen, like all over the place, governments were like, man, these guys have been a thorn in our side for a long time.
Yeah.
Now we might get some U.S. help actually getting rid of these groups.
Yeah.
These terrorist groups. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't really an alliance, but certainly Syria. I mean, we were sending Al-Qaeda guys into Syria to be tortured for information. Like the U.S. government was doing this.
Yeah.
So he was a friend of ours at the time, sort of. Convenient, but
And wasn't Assad more friendly to Christians in Syria than
lot
of other countries have been?
Absolutely, and that's what I was getting
and more friendly than what the new government's going to be?
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
And I was getting to that. Like what we've done by supporting the Sunni jihadists in their overthrow of the secular Syrian government.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same thing that we did in Iraq, really.
Yeah.
Or frankly, Afghanistan, although, we had the Islamist government in Afghanistan that we spent 20 years practically trying to overthrow. And then the government, all right, think how bad this is. Like we have a really bad track record on this.
Yeah.
So if you just look at Afghanistan, the government that the U.S. set up in Afghanistan was so horrific that the people there actually preferred the Taliban.
Taliban, yeah, all right.
And besides the fact that we spent nearly 20 years and $2 trillion to reestablish the status quo.
Yeah.
Like to leave it essentially exactly as it had been when we arrived.
Yeah.
Except a whole lot poorer
right.
and with a lot more damage.
And a lot of stuff we left behind.
Well, yeah. That too. But then the military gets to rebuy all that equipment.
Well, that's the reason we left it there. Like, yeah. That's not...
And in Iraq's been a mess. Of course, you talked about Libya. That's another one. Secular government that we overthrew, and now it's a tangled mess of militant groups all fighting for power of the country. And there's no real government in there. It's complete... they have open air slave markets again. Like we've reestablished the slave trade in Africa.
Yeah.
And I suspect that we'll see something like this in Syria. We helped to overthrow a secular government that protected minority groups. And now we're going to have an Islamist government. And I was saying this to some people at the office when they were asking me about it early this week. What I thought of what was going on in Syria. I was like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was before I knew...
You had right into it.
Yeah, that it was al-Jawlani and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that had marched into Damascus and taken control.
Yeah.
And I said, we've overthrown a secular government to place an Islamist government in power.
Yeah.
And it's going to be far worse than the government that we got rid of. It's going to be worse for the minorities. And it's probably going to be a far more authoritarian government than existed before.
Yeah.
And it'll almost certainly be our enemy in the future because they've been our enemy in the past.
Yeah, right. They haven't had some big change of heart, right?
No, that's what the media is trying to tell us about al-Jawlani now. Like, oh, he's changed. He's, his eyes have opened. He's had a change of heart. Now he supports the... No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
We're a convenient ally right now.
Exactly.
the shifting alliances in the Middle East are as stable as the sand dunes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like it's and you would think that they would know, because the other side of that is that the Sunni governments, like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they're supporting this right now.
Yeah.
Because they see it as a blow against their enemies, the Shia.
Yeah.
Right. And they've accepted they essentially accepted before, and I expect we'll see more of the same in the new Trump term, the Abraham Accords that were essentially bribing these governments with taxpayer dollars, because the Palestinians are Sunni primarily, of just forgetting about supporting the Palestinians for the price of taxpayer dollars. And now they got the bonus also of the U.S. Supporting a war against their enemies, the Shia.
Yeah.
But this is pretty short-sighted, because we've been on the other side of this war before. And once the Shia have lost power all over the Middle East, then we'll turn on the Sunnis again.
Yeah. And the cycle continues.
Yeah. So, I mean, and maybe they know that. I mean, this is a region that has historically had short alliances, alliances of convenience. A bunch of independent warlords, one of them's being attacked, and I get my chance. I see my opportunity to take advantage of the situation and ally with a former enemy to take out another enemy. And then once that's done, we're back to being enemies again. Yeah. I haven't played any of the clips. I really should play some clips, I suppose.
All right.
Although I don't know what fits here. Maybe this isn't the place. I'll find a better place. Actually, no. Talking about Al-Jilani and our support of him, I think this is a good place to throw in that clip of Pam Bondi that I was talking about last week that I couldn't find.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I found it.
All right.
And so it actually seems relevant in light of the guy that we're supporting here in the war against Syria. So let me go ahead and play that clip.
All right.
The United States has clear and enduring interests in Syria. We have a strong interest in preventing the reemergence of ISIS, given the death and destruction that it's wrought for so long. We have a clear interest in ensuring that whatever weapons of mass destruction or components are left in Syria do not fall into the wrong hands. We have a clear interest in doing what we can to avoid the fragmentation of Syria, mass migrations from Syria, and, of course, the export of terrorism and extremism.
Okay, I know that didn't sound like Pam Bondi. I decided instead...
her voice has changed.
I decided instead to play the Anthony Blinken clip about why we have to have an interest in Syria. Having discussed all this and like who we've supported in the capture of Syria, it's kind of ridiculous, don't you think, that he says we have an interest in preventing the rise of ISIS again? No, these are the same people. The people we're supporting are the same people. That's who we're supporting. Like, it's unreal. I mean, I have to assume, I guess I don't have to assume, but I assume that the Secretary of State knows who the shirts and the skins are. Like who these people are.
Well, you hope so.
But maybe not. But I think he's just counting on that none of us do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that he can say, well, we have to be involved here because we got to prevent the rise of ISIS, while we're actually supporting the remains of ISIS.
Yeah.
So that it seemed like a more appropriate clip. Now we'll play Pam Bondi.
All right.
Look around. The thing that's really the most troubling to me, these students in universities in our country, whether they're here as Americans or if they're here on student visas, and they're out there saying, I support Hamas. You and I have seen that on all of these television shows. Frankly, they need to be taken out of our country, or the FBI needs to be interviewing them right away when they're saying, I support Hamas, I am Hamas. That's not saying I support all these poor Palestinians who are trapped in Gaza. That's not what they're saying. So I think their student visas need to be revoked. I think we need to reinstate President Trump's travel ban immediately. There's a lot of things that can be done to stop this. But yeah, the anti-Semitism that is rampant throughout this country now, and it's truly, truly heartbreaking to see what's happening to all of our Jewish friends in this country by really just, I think, a lot of ignorant kids and students and people who don't understand that Hamas equals terrorism, even worse, at its worst.
Okay. Kind of the same point.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that she thinks that that there should be FBI should look into anybody who supports Hamas. Okay. How about people that support Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? What do we do about the government officials
Yeah.
and the intelligence guys who are supporting a terrorist that's on the State Department's website with a $10 million reward for his capture? And the group that the State Department has classified as a terrorist group. What do we do about them?
Right.
I mean, it suddenly seems relevant. Like if Pam Bondi, if you think that that dumb college kids that probably don't entirely understand the situation but see an opportunity to protest about something, certainly they're not all like that, but I suspect particularly people that say I am Hamas, don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Just know that there's something wrong. Yeah. And they're right about that part. They just,
Yeah, they got the details wrong a little bit.
Yeah, because they don't really know the details. It reminds me of that clip a while back of the two girls, and they're asking them why they're there, and they're like, oh, well, turns out they don't know anything about the history or the actual conflict that's going on at the time, but they know that, the Palestinians are mistreated or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah.
So, probably some of those people. I didn't hear a lot of people saying, I am Hamas and so forth. I don't remember that specifically. It probably happened. I mean, there are thousands of kids out there complaining. So, But at the same time, like if you're going to hold these college kids responsible for saying that they side with Hamas, what do you do about government officials who actually wield some power siding with terrorists and terrorist organizations? What do you do about that?
Yeah, apparently nothing.
Probably. I mean, she's not in office yet, but I haven't heard her come out and say anything about that.
Oh, and she won't. Well, you can count on that.
Yeah. So we're on the wrong side of this. And I don't know that there's a right side of this. The real place that we should be is nowhere close.
Is neutral.
Yeah. Out of this entirely. Middle East is not our problem.
Yeah.
I mean, we've made it our problem.
Yeah.
Maybe Israel's problem, and that's why we're out there. But Israel's not helping us.
Yeah.
And if this goes south for us, Israel won't help us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're another ally of convenience for Israel.
Oh, absolutely.
They used to ally with Iran. Remember? Because the Iran-Contra affair, the whole thing is that Israel was mediating the deals between the U.S. government and Iran, because at the time, even though we were on Iraq's side in the war against Iran, Israel supported Iran.
Yeah.
And so while we were negotiating with our enemy, Israel was the mediator.
Yeah.
And then they decided that they were better off supporting Iraq against Iran instead of the other way around. And so they just changed the policy because it seemed better for them at that time.
Yeah.
And that could change again anytime. And that's all we are too. We're just a tool.
Yeah.
And man, are we a tool.
In every sense of the word, right?
Yeah. So I do want to talk a little bit about the U.S. sanctions, because the U.S. sanctions have definitely played a part in how this progressed so quickly.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, the U.S. sanctions that isolated Syria have ravaged the economy, led almost certainly to bribes of military forces, and the cheering populace that you're going to see now because they have become so poor.
Yeah.
This has been a U.S. government punishment on all the people of Syria, whether they sided with Assad or not. And now that Assad's fallen, and the terrorist group that has taken over has said, "Oh, we'll restore profit is the word that comes to mind, but that's not the word that I'm going for. Oh my God. Anyway, the prosperity. There we go. Okay. That's the word I'm going for.
Yeah.
That will restore prosperity and so forth, and people are cheering in the streets. Yeah, it's been rough.
Yeah.
Now, I bring this up specifically because we have always said that that sanctions don't work to cause popular uprisings to overthrow governments.
Yeah.
And you might be thinking, well, it worked this time.
Yeah. You don't think so?
No, because it wasn't a popular uprising that overthrew the government. It was
Colored revolution.
Other nations' military forces. No, It was a terrorist group and the Turkish military and the Israeli military and the U.S. military, frankly, too, and the Kurds. It wasn't a popular uprising at all. The majority of the population in Syria may be happy to see Assad go because they've had such a hard time, and they see any kind of change as an opportunity for things to get better for them.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll work out for them either.
Yeah.
But it wasn't sanctions that caused a popular uprising. There was no popular uprising here. It was a military attack from outside.
I got you.
Yeah, it was a rise of foreign militaries and terrorists that overthrew the government, not the people.
Yeah.
And then the last thing that I want to discuss is what to do with the Kurds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because the Kurds have historically opposed the Assad government, because remember when we left Syria at the end of Trump's terms, we're abandoning the Kurds.
I remember that.
Yeah. So they have been historically against the Assad government, but also against Turkey.
Yeah.
Now, once again, this is another convenient alliance, although I don't think actually the Turkish military and the Kurds are fighting together here, but they're fighting the same group.
Yeah.
Being the Syrian government forces.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So what happens once this is settled? Because the Turkish government is still intent on getting rid of the Kurds.
Yeah.
And now they have they're in a position where they can practically envelop the Kurds, where they couldn't before because they couldn't put their forces on Syrian sovereign territory.
Yeah.
But now there is no real Syrian sovereign territory.
They can go wherever they want.
Yeah. So now they can kind of surround the Kurds and wipe them out. Yeah. So what is when Turkey decides to do that?
Yeah.
What does the U.S. do about that? Do we abandon the Kurds to be slaughtered by our NATO ally, the Turks?
Yeah. Probably. Or maybe we step in with our military and...
Yeah. Do we defend the Kurds?
Yeah.
Against our NATO ally, the Turks?
Yeah.
I mean, what do we do then? And then, so what happens from here? Like, I think, and this is, I don't know if this is, I think this might be the best case scenario, because the idea of the Islamist jihadists running Syria doesn't bode well.
Yeah.
So what, I think that probably Syria breaks up. This is another thing. Remember, Blinken said we didn't want to see the Syria fractured.
Yeah.
But that's almost certainly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so who gets what? Like maybe the Kurds actually are able to, because that's what they're trying to do right now, is cut off their own little section of territory that can be Kurdistan or whatever. Yeah. The Turks are going to capture as much as they can. And so is Israel. And in fact, let me play a clip from Netanyahu.
All right.
Also means we have to against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found.
All right, so they've moved. Israel's just saying, not Netanyahu's saying that the Syrian forces abandoned their posts, and the Israeli forces took up those posts in Syria.
And now we're gonna keep them.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's not what he said,
No.
but like,
He said,
he's a Jew. What do you think? He's just gonna give it back? Like,
it's a temporary occupation, just like the Golan Heights and Gaza and the West Bank that they have been temporarily occupying for more than 50 years.
They don't exactly have a good track record of giving land back.
No. And it's the case here. And so, yeah, he's moved his forces into the Golan Heights, into the unoccupied parts of the Golan Heights. Remember, Israel was already occupying Syrian territory in the Golan Heights. Yeah. And now they're occupying more than what they had before.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing reports now that the Israeli forces have moved up to within about 15 miles of Damascus.
Yeah.
And if Syria, like if Israel can take as far as Damascus, they'll be happy to do so. And those maps that Netanyahu's government's put out for years of greater Israel include all the way to Damascus. So, but then they may come into conflict with the Turks, who also want to take as much territory as they can.
Yeah.
So then,
what do we do if
then we've got allies on either side that go to war? One of them is a NATO ally, and one of them's not. But they're both allies of the U.S.
Yeah.
But the Turks are only an ally of the U.S. through NATO, and Israel is an ally. I don't know why, honestly.
I think that we'll find out real quick that NATO ain't our priority.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what happens there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's probably not a good thing in this particular scenario. But
so you may see Syria break up into three parts with a Kurdish-controlled area, a Turkish-controlled area, and an Israeli-controlled area.
Yeah.
And that might be the best situation. At least it would come a little closer to aligning the cultural and ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah.
Because this whole thing was just drawn up by Europeans 100 years ago. And so
I do still worry, though, of how hard the Israelis and the Turks will fight to level out where the lines are drawn.
Yeah. And I worry about what the Israelis will do to the native population.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's always that.
The Turks, too.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about what the Turks do with the Kurds.
Yeah.
Because that's where their real enemy is. Where does Russia fit into all this?
Well, Russia's just too busy right now. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to, is that this just isn't as big of a priority for Russia as it was a few years ago.
But Syria has been a very tolerant, like in terms of ethnic and cultural differences, place for a long time. Now, enemies of the government were enemies of the government. I'm not trying to make any kind of claim that Assad was a good guy.
Oh, yeah.
Seen some of the pictures of people that have been released from prison for the first time in 15 or 20 years. Like, he dealt with his enemies brutally.
Yeah.
Of course, the other side of that is that he was watching his country fall apart around him years ago.
Yeah.
And he'd seen what had happened to Gaddafi.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't want to become Gaddafi, so...
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Weird situation for him. But the main thing is with Assad, you have a Western-educated ophthalmologist who was running this country, who was tolerant of the Alawites and the Salafists and the Shia and the Sunni and the Christians and the Jews and everybody.
Yeah.
Like... And you don't have that anymore.
No. It's going to go one way or the other now.
You have Israel that's absolutely been a Jewish supremacist state.
Yeah.
And Turkey, who... it's funny here because two of the scariest leaders to me in the world are Erdogan and Netanyahu.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because they're both intelligent and ambitious. They each run a country that is inherently expansionist. Israel has been an expansionist country since its inception.
Yeah.
Turkey has designs on a new Ottoman Empire.
Yeah.
You know, we make these claims that Russia's trying to reestablish the Russian Empire, but they're not.
Yeah.
But Turkey is trying to reestablish the Ottoman Empire. And
Yeah.
Israel is trying to establish Greater Israel, capturing much more control of the Middle East than they have right now.
Yeah.
And they've been open about this, both of them.
Yeah. And they're both fixing to go head to head here in Syria.
Right.
Which is, like I say, it goes back to the reason that I worry is because, like, I don't think that they're going to fight it out a little bit and then draw some lines. I think that this could be a really intense, in the trenches, drawn out thing.
It could be. And remember, Israel has nuclear weapons.
It's true. Does Turkey doesn't?
No.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I didn't know one way or the other. Supposedly they don't.
Turkey has American missiles in their country, but they shouldn't be nuclear.
Okay.
But they could be.
Yeah, we don't actually know. Right. And how much control does the Turks have of our?
None, really.
Yeah, I mean that's.
I mean, but they're there in their country. Yeah. It's easier for them to.
I mean, they could kick us out and take them over, right?
Yeah, it would be hard for us to defend there.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly harder for us to defend logistically than it is for them to attack.
Yeah.
Since it is their country.
It's their country. Yeah. Exactly.
So I don't know. This is a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess, and it's a
well,
mess.
I'm now
partly
more
because
worried about it than I was before this podcast.
Glad I could help.
Like, I hadn't really been that worried about this particular situation.
Well, and you know, I'm just talking about possibilities.
Yeah.
Like, so it may not go that badly. I actually think the division of Syria is probably about the best it could go for us.
Yeah.
But that's the problem here, is that terrible situation is about the best it could go for us.
Yeah.
Because whoever in the State Department or the Pentagon or the White House or wherever is actually making the decisions to support this kind of thing apparently is completely incapable of thinking about what happens next.
Yeah, right. They can't see where the next chip's going to fall.
Yeah. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. This is definitely something to keep an eye on. This is not something to ignore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I guess that's clear after the podcast, at least, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to preach doom and gloom, but it has certainly, in a very significant way, destabilized an already unstable region.
Yeah. Yeah.
Further destabilized an already unstable region.
And we have an stable leader taking office.
Castles built on sand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to run this sand theme throughout here, like at this point, and now it's a goal. But that is kind of the end. We need to wrap up. So I don't know. Anything you want to say before wrap up? Questions or anything? Like I
think we're good.
You know, I'm no expert, but I read.
Yeah, right.
And I kind of wanted to talk about South Korea a little bit, but I didn't have time to look into it very much. And you know, Ukraine continues to evolve as well, but this just seemed like more of a priority.
Yeah.
And as I could see that you weren't getting much of a story out of the mainstream media with this.
No, not at all. I mean, that's par for the course, though.
You know, and part of the reason for that is they can't really tell you about like the history of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and al-Jilani.
Yeah.
Because it's embarrassing for the United States government.
Oh yeah, and they're not going to cover something like that. So.
Yeah, and you know, support Israel through and through.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Even if it creates a real disaster for us to try and manage.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's see. Next week is going to be
week before Christmas.
Yeah, but we'll still record, right?
As far as I know, I mean, it is that time of year. So,
Are we going to record the day after Christmas or the day after Christmas?
I would plan to, although I may have to get back with you on that.
All right. Today's the 12th?
Day after Christmas is going to be a no for me, so it may have to be the day after.
That would be the Friday.
That'd be that Friday, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of a big day the day after Christmas at my house.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
My wife's birthday.
Well, yeah.
Still a big day.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I suppose.
You suppose. Well, it is.
I should have thought that through a little more. I was thinking when you said that, I was thinking, oh, do you do like 2 days of Christmas because both sides of the family are here or something like that?
No, we do both sides. So we'll do a Christmas Eve with my wife's side, and then we'll do Christmas Day with my side.
Oh, okay.
And that's pretty well the way that's distributed at this point.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Yeah. And then
birthday.
And then birthday the day after. Yep.
Okay. Wow, that's a really celebratory, very festive.
It's a
few days,
fun-filled couple of days. Yeah,
yep.
Few days. So,
yep. I ordered something for her. It hasn't gotten here yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it'll get here before Christmas. I ain't get anything for you. I can't come up with anything for you.
Well, the feeling's mutual. So.
That's cool. All right. Well, we'll wrap up and talk about Christmas plans later.
Yeah. The good news is we should record. So.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Cool. So we'll be back next week. In the meantime, you can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean. Like and share, comment, subscribe. You can always email me at michael@thelibertymike.com. Questions, comments, things that you want me to talk about, articles, whatever. And then, tell your friends because it helps. And all those interactions actually help too.
Oh, absolutely.
So really appreciate any kind of interaction on any of the platforms, because it just triggers the algorithms in some way that put it in front of more people. And we want to be in front of more people.
And that's something that we should study up and figure out, because there's a way to manipulate those algorithms and we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Because
in fact, if you have some kind of expertise in this, Michael@thelibertymike.com.
We would be interested, because
happily take pointers.
Because I know it can be done, but
yeah,
we're not doing it.
You know more people than I do.
Yeah.
I know somebody that's pretty good with YouTube stuff. I think I could contact him. But anyway. So we'll be back next week when we finally get this right. And in the meantime, try to stay free.
Life short, live free.
Ciao.
Later.